Hey, what's up? This is Gabe Taylor from the Eastern Sierra Avalanche Center, and I'm here with our three forecasters. Boys, introduce yourselves.
I'm Josh Feinberg.
Chris Englehart.
Steve Mace.
How are we all doing?
Good.
Doing well.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Real quick, let's touch on last year. What happened? I mean, the snow was horrible, upside down. Describe it. Like, what scientifically happened in the snowpack, and kind of what can we look out for in the future so that we know that those things are out there?
I'll start with just we had not a whole lot of snowfall, and the snowfall we had came all at once in a huge storm. But some of the snow that started early kind of sat around and faceted, became sugary and not too supportable, and then some snow fell on top of it. And then it just sat. We had these big periods of not a lot of snow happening, and they made for some more interesting snowpack than we've seen in a while. And then when a big dump did come, some interesting things happened. You guys want to add more to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like Josh was saying, we had relatively small amounts of snow until the end of January, where we got, I think it was 96 inches.
Yeah, on the 28th.
72 hours or so. Mm-hmm. So we just had a huge new load on top of a really weak faceted base, and we saw a lot of avalanche activity.
So going through years past, is it possible that we could get that type of snowfall, 9 feet or whatever, and have it bond?
I think
I've been asked that a bunch.
if to bond to the previous snow, I mean, that all just depends on how quickly those storms are stacked on top of each other, what kind of base we have underneath that big storm.
So immediate red flag.
Yeah, I think anytime you get a big precip event like that, it's a huge red flag.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, everything was going, and with such limited snowfall in the beginning of the year, we knew that it was kind of possible that that would happen, and then it did. Did it ever really heal throughout the season?
For sure, it became, if you want to use the word heal, it became dormant. We had that fairly robust slab over the faceted snow that existed throughout pretty much the rest of the season.
So even late season, it was still down there.
Yeah, in most places where it had an avalanche during the storm event, it kind of hung around for the rest of the year, pretty much. A lot of places it actually compressed and gained more strength. So that big weight on top of it slowly settling and reducing the porosity and the weakness of the underlying faceted snow. It just kind of more compressed and rounded and gained strength and did heal, like as you said. So, but it still was sort of that overall upside down nature, especially in the northern zone of the forecast area, for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy when that happens, because we've seen years where that layer just lurks beneath, and then you get 10, 20 feet of snow on top of it, and that's when things rip, because it's so hard to tell when something like that's going to go. So, if that were to be the case, it looks like, let's bring it to the present, we have the possibilities of some pretty big snowfall on the way, and it's October, 21? So, we could have a solid base. And is that something, as you guys are kind of paying attention to the snowpack, that you're going to keep tabs on, moving forward? Early snow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anytime we get early snow like this, personally for me, it's awesome to see snow on the ground, and it's great to start to build that base, but it also puts a flag in my mind for, the gap of time in between now and the next big storm cycle. If we continue to see snow from here forward, that'll lead to a lot more solid snowpack. But if we have a long period of dry weather and cold temps, we might start to see some of that same faceting that we saw last season. So the early snow, it's awesome, but it could also lead to early faceting, which is, again, that base of the snowpack for future. So that would be the concern, I think, with some of this early snow, but yeah.
So are you guys going to get out and poke around after the storm? And Josh, you were saying that you might be doing some work up on the mountain and just see how things are bonding.
Well, with the forecast here for this weekend, if it comes at all through like they're saying it's going to, the Sunday through Tuesday, I mean, we could have the biggest early season dump we've had in a long, long time. Mountain's planning on opening up next Friday, and I'll be doing a couple days of patrol work before that to help things get going. Absolutely. I'll be poking around on the mountain, and then hopefully there'll be enough to actually poke around safely other places. A lot of times we have early season fall, snowfall. It covers things, but not enough to like really ski with any kind of confidence with all the little logs and rocks lurking. But hopefully this will come in, and really the Sierra cement will just paste it in, and you can get out and cruise around. So,
yeah, that's one of the best things I keep reading in the forecast. It's just wet, heavy, gloppy snow. It's like, hell yeah, that's exactly what we want.
Yeah,
Good base building material.
Yeah, totally.
for sure. But
So,
along the lines that we were saying, yeah, for to go back to the early season snowfall, like we fortunately didn't have any fatalities out here in the Eastern Sierra last year from this weird pack, but all over the Rockies, and it was one of the worst avalanche years in history in terms of fatalities. And a lot of that was directly because of the early season snowfall that these guys all got, and then it sat around dry, as Steve was saying, and cold and just faceted, and then when snowfall came, that's that early season stuff that really was attributed to a lot of these accidents.
Yeah, crazy. Heads up. Got to be heads up out there. Anything that you guys have noticed that's different over the last couple of years? And I'll lead you the way that I think that I'd like you to answer this question. But I've seen a lot more trucks, a lot more people at trailheads. And I know people want to get out there. And I've seen people in spots that I haven't seen in the past, which is great. It gets lonely when you're out in the backcountry over and over again by yourself. But what would you say to those people that are going out into the backcountry for the first time? Maybe this is their first season buying backcountry equipment, and where do they start, and kind of what does that process look like?
Well, definitely the equipment that's come into play the last decade has really increased the ease of use to get out there, and also with the cost of skiing all around, buying a setup has allowed a lot more people to get out there. But I think we spoke to it last season, it really is good to trying to find a mentor, people, not necessarily to take you because they know the terrain, but have more experience with the whole regime of what equipment you need, how to use it, what resources there are out there to get more education. We do really, encourage people that want to get into backcountry riding for the first time to, it doesn't mean you need to do it right away, but to take an avalanche course through a good authority like one of the local guide businesses here on the east side, so you get that kind of base of education before getting out there, as well as fine-tuning your skills on a developed ski area really helps. So you really do know how to proficiently ride. So when you get out there, you're in a more backcountry wilderness environment where an accident can be much more severe, right?
Yeah, totally.
And right, like touring and backcountry riding, 90% of it's going uphill. So learning your equipment, right? And so you can proficiently travel up there. It's a heck of a lot of it, honestly. And so you can therefore, learn from other people, learn from education courses about terrain and what's a safe route. A lot of it is common sense of really proper terrain choice. So what is and what is not avalanche terrain.
Yeah, it seems like that aspect of it, okay, here's what the mountain's doing, and being able to identify how to pick your line, how to make smart choices from that perspective is smart. But then there's that side of it that I don't really hear that too many people talk about, and it's just being fit, just knowing how to ski and ride that stuff, knowing how to transition in an efficient manner. Because if something goes wrong out there and you're tired, you're gonna be more slow. And if you don't have patrol there. So I think that's something that I've seen a lot of people kind of take for granted, is how hard it is.
I think that's a good point. Getting into backcountry skiing, even if you've been riding at the resort for a long time, it's a different sport. And so I'd recommend starting small. It's not about going out and hitting the biggest line right away. It's about kind of getting into it patiently, learning how to tell those proper terrain choices, learning how your equipment works, and maybe honestly breaking it a couple times and figuring out how to fix that stuff. That's something we've all had to do in the backcountry in our careers, and being able to kind of identify when things are changing in a way that might be heightening the danger, et cetera. So starting smaller than you think is a good way to go, both in terms of your goals, your route choice, and just the terrain you're choosing to ride in. Things are a lot more consequential in the backcountry.
Hyper aware.
Yeah.
And use the foreground. I use that metaphor a lot, where it's like, you know, you look outside and it's like, oh, you got bloody and red slate. And like, well, look at right there, like down there, there's some pretty sweet terrain that nobody really skis. So start there and then work up to that big stuff. Like, I see a lot of goal setting, and that I think you're just chasing these carrots that are really advanced and really hard, and you know, you can get hurt.
Yeah, and I think along that line too, you know, staying flexible in your choices is super important. You know, if you have that carrot, if you have that goal, it's really easy to pigeonhole yourself into that mindset of like, I need to hit this line, and if it's not the day, it's not the day. You know, and being able to kind of change and adapt to the conditions you're seeing on the ground at any one point is super important.
How often do you guys stand down? Do you look at a line and say, not today?
All the time.
It's
you know,
best, hardest decision ever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been upset with saying no. You know, because there's always another, you know, the mountain's going to be there. You can always get back when the time is right. Anytime I've looked at decisions in my experience in my career backcountry skiing that I'm disappointed in, it's when I said yes to something I should have said no to. So I've never regretted backing off of something, because there's usually something else fun to do.
Yeah, totally.
I think making a plan B along with your plan A right ahead of time, so you know if something doesn't look good, you already have like, well, all right, not to think about like, let's pick out the map and figure out something else to do. You already have an idea, and that'll make it easier for you to like, all right, plan B is still a good option for today. So to think about that ahead of time.
Yeah.
It can be really hard to like put all this effort into getting up into the mountains, you know, hours and hours, and you're one day off a week maybe to pull the plug and say no. But it's so important to be able to do that, and to respect yourself. That's oftentimes, you know, the harder choice to make, and to really be like, you know, it would have been easier to go up there and ski that line and get lucky. But to realize, give yourself credit. I made the hard choice that day, and like be proud of yourself for it.
And to that point, you know, what role does communicating with your crew come into play there?
It's huge.
It's huge.
aspect.
I mean, communication should be constant throughout the day. You know, it's the night before when you're maybe coming up with a game plan with multiple options, to the morning when you meet. And then like Steve said, you know, you're constantly evaluating all day as you're out there to changing conditions, whether it be weather, whether it be dumping really hard, maybe it's getting really hot, maybe there's a lot more people or people in the terrain choice you were going to. So you're constantly reevaluating and communicating it with your partners to, you know, you might be able to make a decision earlier than later when you get to a spot. And then when you're getting on slope, you know, you're just constantly evaluating. You're seeing clues, physical clues, observing. Is there recent avalanches? Is there wind loading? Is the snow loading the slope actively that you can see when you're going up there? And you're communicating that, what you're seeing right there, right there in the moment. So you're just kind of all day long reevaluating. Do you need to go to that plan B? You need to go to plan C, you know, or boom, man, we're going to go to plan A. This is on, it's lining up today. It's looking good. We're going to keep pushing on. So
yeah.
I'd add that communication, that style of communication that's really effective, takes a lot of practice too. It's not, even with someone who you are super close with in another aspect of life, it might not be an easy thing to talk about. You know, maybe you have a lot more experience than I do, and I'm intimidated to speak up about my feelings, and that's just something that both parties can kind of help address those by just being hyperactive in that communication process.
Yeah. I remember a couple of years ago, I was traversing from one bowl to another with a buddy, and it's super benign. Thought, you know, took a look, looked safe, threw a headphone in, was just going to plow across, and all of a sudden I kind of hear something. What's up? He's like, what are you doing? Like, this is so sketchy. Like, let's go down and around. I'm like, oh yeah, that is pretty sketchy. We go down and around. Next day, I'm up on the top of the mountain, and I look, full thing just ripped. The next day, somebody went and traversed, followed our track, and decided to keep going, and the whole thing ripped. And it was like, dude, I was not paying attention. I took my eyes off of what we were doing for 1 second, and thank goodness I had somebody that was willing to communicate, that was willing to speak up. So I think that's really important, is just having the voice, you know, knowing that you are a huge part in your crew and your voice is going to be heard.
And picking your people appropriately in that way, you know, like skiing with people you're comfortable having those conversations and making those decisions with. It's super important.
Totally. What role does the forecast play when somebody's making a decision, whether or not to go out for the day? how do you guys want to see the forecast used? I know how I use it, and I think that the role of the forecast is something that probably not everybody knows how to accurately use.
It's a guideline. It's not a starting point.
Yeah, I think you stole the words out of my mouth. It's a good starting point. And I think it's also important to remember, too, that we paint with a pretty broad brush with the forecast. But as a skier, I'm more interested in a very fine point pen, right, when I'm drawing the lines that I want to ski. So I think keeping your eyes open once you're out there and digesting the information beyond the color rating and the bottom line, but actually digging into those problem types and reading those descriptions of where those problems may exist or how they might act, and then taking that information, looking at a map, understanding where you're going, what type of terrain it is, and putting those pieces together before you even leave your house. You can already start to kind of make some decisions, and then go to the field and keep your eyes open for those things, and just be looking for the unknowns. There's a lot of uncertainty in this game that we play in the backcountry, and being willing to accept that and keep your mind open to it is super important.
So for those that don't know, how big is our forecast area?
It ranges in the south all the way from Bishop Creek out of Bishop in the Owens Valley, all the way up to the Virginia Lakes area by Mono Lake. 80 miles of road. So it's really extensive and ranges, from down at 5,000 feet up to 14,000 feet in elevation too.
Yeah.
So we have some of the most dramatic topographical relief in the world on the Eastern Sierra. And also that change in latitude from Bishop up to Mono Lake or past Lee Vining is pretty significant as well. So it's pretty huge. So like Steve said, it's a broad brush stroke with the forecast. There's how many drainages are in that? Over a dozen major drainages. So with 3 of us, there's only so many places we can get to on any given day. So the forecast is a great way to start that process of seeing what we're seeing in regards to elevation and aspect, and you can get some information to match that to where you want to go. So
it's pretty crazy. I mean, the differences from the top of Mammoth Mountain to Bishop Creek, in snowfall, in wind, up to V Lakes, and just all of the different stuff that you guys deal with, and trying to come up with something that is coherent and that works for all of the skiers and snowboarders on the east side. It's awesome. It's a daunting task.
We forecast for what the worst conditions that we feel could exist within that range. And as you said, it could dump 2 feet up here in Virginia Lakes, and Bishop Creek might get an inch.
Yeah.
And obviously there's going to be different dangers. We're forecasting for the most dangerous spot that we can think of. But we're only 3 people, and we have our weather forecast that we go off of. We have some remote sensors that pick up some data. We have people go out and give us information, but we're pretty limited in terms of what we can cover in this whole range. And so you really have to take that in consideration in our forecasts. We do the best we can, and sometimes we miss something, and sometimes they're not perfect.
Perfect segue. Observations. How can I make a helpful observation?
Well, log on to esavalanche.org, hit the participate tab, and then post an observation. And really, the best, any information is good information. Even if it's just, I saw this thing, I wasn't sure, maybe it's wind loading or snow blowing around, or maybe you saw an avalanche, you could even just take some photos or a video and post that up. You don't need to, if you're daunted by the lingo or the, writing out a description, don't let that stop you from sharing information. And you can also find our email addresses. Any one of us you could email. They're listed on the website, and we will share that amongst ourselves as well. But I would encourage you to always post your observations, particularly if you see something that gives you pause or makes you, think twice about a line, or especially if you're seeing avalanche activity or anything that spooks you.
Yeah, totally. I hope that's something that we can continue to grow. I think having more eyes, more voices that are out there, and as more people get out there, just tell us what you see. Let us know.
And there's a lot of stigma that exists around accidents and poor choices, and it can be really embarrassing. to have a
Judgment City on that thing sometimes.
especially social media, Facebook and Instagram, people can be pretty harsh out there. But we're all human and we all make mistakes at times, and sometimes we get away with things. But to share that mistake and be vulnerable is really a sign of strength, and we want to encourage that. And we also want to encourage other people who are looking at it to realize that person put themselves out on the limb to share that information that maybe could save someone else's life, and to really be thoughtful about that when they're seeing that on social media, to respond in ways that are going to encourage people to share more, and because we can all learn from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the more that we do it, and the more that we open ourselves up to it, we'll learn to treat each other nice, hopefully. Because it'll just help us get out there, because we want to know what's going on. We have a fundraiser coming up, December 3rd.
The world of COVID is still upon us, so we're still we're doing an outdoor event again this year, as we did last year down in Bishop, the fairgrounds. So it'll be a kind of an outdoor movie style, drive-in style event. So it'll be safer out in the plein air. It'll also be virtual, so people can sign in again from anywhere around the country if they want, around the world. We'll have a speaker, there'll be a huge raffle, silent auction, awesome prizes. This year it sounds like we might likely have a lot of snow to ski on by the season opener, which will be fitting.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So we're looking forward for a great showing. Please, if you're considering coming, come in person if you can, if you're in the neck of the woods, but also sign in and join us virtually. The raffle will be virtual as well, and silent auction, so lots of opportunities to contribute and to potentially win some great prizes.
Yeah. I mean, community support is how this happens. That's how we have the Eastern Sierra Avalanche Center. It's through support from the community. So, yeah, it's cool to get the tribe together and have some fun and learn. We're not sure who's going to speak yet, but I'm sure they'll have something cool to say and tell some stories, and hopefully we learn some stuff. Anything else you want to say as we're kind of coming to an end, as we go into this exciting season with snowfall in the forecasts?
Well, I want to think that's going to positively, that we're going to have a good winter, and that this storm's going to develop this weekend. It's been two pretty difficult seasons. I've been doing this for 22 years, and last winter was probably the hardest winter I've ever endured. So I know that I'm chomping at the bit a little bit to have a better season and get some skiing, but it's also to keep that in mind, just like that some of the biggest times you get in trouble is like when you just have that fever, the powder fever, saying, you got to learn when's not appropriate to tee off on something. And, we hope that producing the forecast gives people just that good planning and preparation to head out there with as much information as they can, but it's still up to everybody to take care of themselves out there. Our main job is to give you as much and as well-informed information as we can, and we do the best we can for a huge area. And if indeed we get a good early start this year, it's going to make a lot of people real happy. So I'm hoping it produces this forecast we're looking at for the weekend. So.
All right, well, that wraps it up. This has been Gabe Taylor from the Eastern Sierra Avalanche Center. Thank you. Support your local center. Support us. Support getting out into the backcountry. Learn something and have some fun. Have a good season.